And finally, it's over. Finally, we can get the recap and reaction over with for UFC 309 fight fans. Going to be giving you a total recap and reaction of this entire card. Going to be starting off with the first fight on this card, Eduarda Moura versus Veronica Hardy. Unfortunately, we got the news right before it started, so this card started a little bit later because Chris Weidman and Eric Anders was called off because Eric Anders was sick with an illness. Anyways, back to this fight. In the first round, it was pretty just, tit for tat on the feet, pretty much staying in range with both of these guys. Moura was definitely topping over Hardy, looked very, very bigger, looked a lot more, especially with her length in this division, a lot more firm and filled out compared to Veronica Hardy. Landed a couple of straight rights down the pipe on Veronica Hardy, kind of hurting her in the second round. She gets the takedown. Moura gets the takedown, gets most of the control, has most of the success in the round. And in the third round, Veronica Hardy had a little bit of success, but it was a typical WMMA fight, which we usually get in most of these cards. Eduardo Moura getting a nice and decisive 29-28 victory, per usual for WMMA fight. Moving on up the card, we had Elliott versus Basel Hafez. And man, this was just a technical and easy victory for Elliott. Elliott, man, especially for the first and second round, just keeping it at range, getting the tit for tat game going with the leg kicks, with the jabs, with the kicks to the body as well. And Basel Hafez was very flustered, very confused, especially on the feet. Didn't really know what he wanted to go, hesitant a lot, was stopping and starting a lot. And Elliott was just taking control and definitely was taking the edge, especially in the first two rounds. And in the third round, he was doing exactly what he was doing in the beginning of the fight, and then just lands this nasty overhand right on the jaw of Basel Hafez, drops Basel Hafez badly. I thought he knocked him out as soon as the right hand connected, but I guess the bounce off ahead for the canvas when Basel Hafez's head bounced off the canvas, woke him up, and then a whole bunch of ground and pound kept knocking him out, waking him up, knocking him out, waking him up, until finally the ref decided to step in and call the fight off. Elliott with a very, very impressive performance and a highlight KO to go for his tape. Moving on up the card, we had Ramiz Brahmaj versus Mickey Gall, and Mickey Gall is just terrible fighter. But in this fight, it was actually pretty entertaining, especially on the feet with these two guys. Ramiz coming in as an underdog. These guys were both swinging and banging, meat on meat, hook v hook. And these guys were both landing a lot of nice power shots on each other. Really, really just going at it. But I think Ramiz was definitely having the more effect with his more power shots. Then all of a sudden, Ramiz hurts Mickey Gall, then lands this overhand right and just drops him and gets a great TKO for the Bronx boy, Ramiz Brahimaj. Moving on up the card, we had Marcin Tybur versus Jonathan Diniz. I went with Marcin Tybur because I think he was a more experienced veteran. Was able to weather the storms to be able to go through these trials and tribulations type of fight that he's gone through. And Jonathan Diniz doesn't really have good names on his record, even though he's a pretty good kickboxer, has good power in his hand. Definitely stunned Tybura early in the fight. Damn near dropped him, it would look like. And then it goes into a grappling exchange, and you just immediately know Diniz is nowhere near the level of Tybura, even though he's a big, fat, fucking oaf of a heavyweight. That's usually what most of these heavyweights are. Um, but it looks like that Diniz is just lost on the ground. Tybura definitely wins that with just the control and throwing up the submissions, and Diniz just looks like an amateur with the BJJ. And then into the second round, Tybura then gets another takedown, gets control on Jonathan Diniz, and just starts hammering these nasty elbows down on Diniz that just opens him up, and it's just a bloody mess. It looks like literally a movie scene on Diniz's face. He gets to the end of the second round. The fight honestly could have got called off, but it didn't. And since it did not, they stopped the fight in the corner and the doctor stoppage, and Marcin Tybura gets a TKO victory for his record and pretty much stays where he's at as of right now. Moving on up the card, we had David Onama versus Roberto Romero. Pretty much, in my opinion, the fight of the night. These two guys went to damn war with each other, especially in that first round. Being a no name, coming off and just coming into the UFC, getting a very short notice opponent for David Onama, and Roberto Romero was nasty with the kick, especially in that first round, inside outside, just really bringing the pressure, hurting David Onama a lot in the first round. Really, I think he took it to him and he won that first round, but in the second and third, David Onama started to have the tide go to his way, be able to turn the ship and have the fight really where he needed to be able to get to, and really use that experience and that potential that he has, especially for the fighter that a lot of people believe that he is in the UFC. And with that all happening, and Romero just seemingly just slowing down as the rounds continue to go by in that fight, it just shows that Onama was just on a different class with these with compared to Roberto Romero. But David Onama with a very, very good outing. He seems to get in these firefights for the most part of his career. If he's able to simmer that down and just show his elite level, he can do a lot better, I believe, in his career. Moving on up the card, we had old man Jim Miller versus Damon Jackson, and man, it was pretty much what we thought the main event was going to be, just a retirement fest out of these two guys. These guys have been in the UFC for a very long time, been in the game for a very long time. These two wily vets coming off losses, and Damon Jackson, me betting against him and going with Jim Miller, even though Jim Miller was the betting odds underdog before this fight started. Damon Jackson was, flustering Jim Miller on the feet, having his moments, especially with the range of the kicks. But then Jim Miller, jumped the, don't be silly, jump the gilly, if you know what I mean. Shout out to Dustin Poirier. And Jim Miller gets a nice submission guillotine victory over Damon Jackson, who I think is a pathetic fighter who is still somehow fighting in the UFC. Moving on up the card, we had Jonathan Martinez versus Marcus McGee, a very, very underrated fight, especially when you're looking at this card and seeing up and down what really was going to be the quote-unquote slept-on underdog, potential best fight on this card. You got Jonathan Martinez being ranked, coming off the loss against Jose Aldo, getting outclassed on the feet with the boxing with Jose Aldo. Marcus McGee on a 5-fight winning streak, just stringing wins along. And Jonathan Martinez looked pretty much similar to what it was in his Jose Aldo fight. Looked, I wouldn't say very flustered, but it was just hard for him to get started, especially in that first round. Marcus McGee on the feet was just doing his thing, not really landing a lot of power punches or hurting Jonathan Martinez, but just doing what he needed to be able to do to win the rounds, especially the second round. Pretty much you can say the same thing for the second round, the entirety of the second round. But towards the end of the second round, Jonathan Martinez lands this heavy, nasty low kick to Marcus McGee, and towards the end of that round, the bell sounds, and then Marcus McGee has to walk back to his corner, and you can see an obvious limp in his gait while he's trying to go to his corner, and then Jonathan Martinez just starts to pour it on, really notices that he's starting to hurt, and really just make it a goddamn mission to fight this guy, and I don't know what the hell Jonathan Martinez shins are made out of. I'm guessing titanium or the highest grade of metal, because Jesus, he doesn't have to land a lot. He just has to be able to land, and it's insane power in those legs, especially to the low kicks. But unfortunately, a little bit too little, a little bit too late. Marcus McGee already was taking control in those first two rounds, and yeah, Jonathan Martinez definitely hurt him and got more damage off, but he was able to survive the round and obviously get the victory. Now on a 6-fight victory streak for Marcus McGee. Moving on to the main card, we had Mauricio Ruffy versus Yames Lontop. And the hype train is choo-chooing as of right now. Get all on aboard. Mauricio Ruffy gets a decision victory over Yames Lontop in a catch weight of 165. Lontop coming off the 2 losses, and recently coming off the loss against Viastav Borshev, and Mauricio Ruffy looking like the next orthodox Conor McGregor. A lot of people had money and were expecting, including me, for Mauricio Ruffy to get this dude out of the first round, especially in the second round after seeing that he landed that nasty left hook that dropped him and nearly put him out. But one thing that you do have to give a lot of credit to, especially in the Borshev fight, if you've seen it, you got to give credit to Lontop's toughness. His chin is absolutely made out of fucking just metal. Just I don't know, man. He doesn't really go down. Doesn't really show that he gets hurt a lot, even though he did get hurt a lot in this fight. A lot of nice crisp right hands. Landing from Mauricio Ruffy, and obviously the no look left hook that put his ass down and should have put him ass out. But he looked like he put on like 25 pounds onto this fight. He did not look like he was at 165 at all. He looked like he was fighting him at like 185. Crazy fat little gut that James Lontop got. Had the advantage, was able to take the shots from Mauricio Ruffy. If it was at the weight limit that they were supposed to be at, I think it's at 155. I think he definitely would have got him out there, especially in that second round with that left hook that Mauricio Ruffy landed. In the third round, Lontop had a lot of success, though, was putting the pressure on him, putting up great pace, landing some good shots, but really overall, I think, Mauricio Ruffy did what he needed to be able to do to get the decision victory. He clearly won, clearly the better fighter, and I think the hype train is still on him pretty well. Hopefully he doesn't get chinned though. I see him eventually later in his career eventually getting chinned, and I really don't want to see that. Anyways, moving on up the card, we had Viviana Araujo versus Karine Silva. Run of the mill, typical WMMA fight. In the first round, Karine Silva, who is, this prospect that is coming up, and we really want to push her to the sky in the flyweight division, was throwing a lot of like front kicks and a lot of shots and like a lot of jabs and stuff that were clearly nowhere near to be found. So the movement and the counter shots from Viviana Araujo was very effective. I really did like that. Her movement, her defense, and her counter shots in that first round was really good. In the second round, though, Karine Silva finally got in her groove where I was landing a lot of power shots. Her straight rights were definitely landing and clipping Viviana Araujo very well. So I gave the second round to Karine, and then the third round, you could just definitely tell Karine was gassed out. She definitely needs to work on her cardio because Jesus Christ, just laying down in guard, just waiting for something to happen because you don't want to stand up and you want to get some rest. I mean, very bad sign. Very bad sign for Karine Silva. I definitely think that she got fraud checked, even though Viviana Araujo is definitely, she's something to deal with. All right, she got the better on the feet. She was definitely a lot crisper, a lot better in condition, and she got the win. Moving on up the card to the future fight, we had Bo Nickel versus Paul Craig. Well, I kind of did expect this to happen in this fight. Bo Nickel didn't really do any type of grappling, but he's known for his great wrestling. Obviously, going against Paul Craig, everybody knows that his BJJ is top tier, especially in the heavier divisions. So this was pretty much just a stand-up fight, and I said Paul Craig's stand-up game was shit. His boxing is shit. Okay, his boxing is pretty terrible, but his kicks are pretty good. His body kicks, his low kicks were pretty all right. You know what I mean? He landed a lot, to the guard and to the arms of Bo Nickel, but, definitely something to be able to be a threat to Bo Nickel. And Bo Nickel, his boxing, his kickboxing wasn't great, but I mean, it is his sixth career pro fight. Only 2 years of training of stand-up. I mean, I guess. I mean, he landed a lot of overhand rights. He landed a nice, even whether it be on the southpaw or orthodox position, he did land a nice, overhand lefts, overhand rights. But calling him overrated, boring, snooze fest of a fight, definitely was that. I expected a lot more from Bo Nickel, and I expected him to get Paul Craig out of there, especially him being so chinny, and him finding the chin as well and landing pretty good shots. Yeah, very poor performance, man. That was definitely a Debbie Downer. Now moving on to the co-main event, we had Charles do Bronx Oliveira versus Michael Chandler, and man, what a great performance put in by Charles do Bronx Oliveira. It is still Olive's era. Well, rounds 1 through 4 was clear and evidently Oliveira's, whether it be on the feet and whether it be on the ground. You have Charles Oliveira, known for his, chaotic but technical striking, and BJJ. He was the one using his wrestling and taking down Michael Chandler. One thing I can say is that Michael Chandler definitely looked a little rusty. If he would have had a couple of fights in him, I think he would have had a better performance. Obviously, so the long layoff I think did do a little bit of disservice to Michael Chandler. Usually it does in most cases, and it definitely did in this fight. But Charles Oliveira mixing in the wrestling into the BJJ and his stand up, just putting on this pressure, this pace, just walking Michael Chandler down. And then Michael Chandler in interviews calling Charles Oliveira a quitter. And then you have Michael Chandler running away for his life against the marauder known as Charles do Bronx Oliveira de Brazil. It was honestly great to see Charles Oliveira definitely show, even at his age, he is still improving and is still making a lot more changes into his game. He's not just going in there to rip people's head off and be chaotic. And even though it is very, very entertaining, and he does sometimes, yes, gets lucky and luck does go inside of his way, he was very, very calculated, a lot more smarter, definitely used his IQ a lot better in this fight in the rematch against Michael Chandler. But then we move into the fifth round. We have, or most people have, Charles up 4-0. Maybe you can have him winning it, having a 10-8 round in one of the rounds that he completely just dominated Michael Chandler, again with the grappling or with the stand-up. His knees up the middle, shots, whether it be kicks to the body, kicks to the leg, regardless of that saying, moving into the fifth round, it's pretty much is what it was the majority of the fight on the feet. You have Charles Oliveira with a stomp to the knee to Michael Chandler, hurting Michael Chandler. And you just have Charles just pretty much pressing, just waiting for time to finish and waiting to just pretty much, have the fight go to the end. And then Michael Chandler just decides to rock Charles Oliveira, rock his world pretty good, hurts him on the feet, backs him up, and damn near puts him out. Has some nasty ground and pound. But for God's sake, this referee will not get fired because he's been refereeing UFC fights for a very long time. But he should be fired. The commission should be in question. There was literally 20 or more back of the head shots that need to be considered, because Jesus Christ, how many back of the head shots are we going to allow? How many back of the head shots are we just going to say, oh, well, it's maybe to the side of the head, maybe it's to the ear, you don't really know he's moving. They're literally illegal. You cannot do them. You cannot illegally hit somebody in the back of the fucking head. What are you doing, referee? You're just standing there like a big dum-dum, not doing anything, not trying to be able to call into questioners, even say to Michael Chandler, hey, you can't do that. Anyways, that happens multiple times. Obviously, if you're a Charles Oliveira fan or you just like to follow the rules of MMA, you're screaming at your device, whether it be your TV, tablet, or phone, what the hell is this referee doing? Not doing anything to Michael Chandler. Anyways, the ground and pound continues, but then Michael Chandler gets into the guard of Charles Oliveira. Things seem to slow down, simmer down. The gas tank of Chandler seems to wane. As it seems to wane, Oliveira throws up the triangle choke, trying to threaten potentially maybe getting the submission. And if he doesn't get the submission, to at least bide some time to get him to recover. It goes back standing up, and it's pretty much tit for tat on the feet for a while. Oliveira then gets the back, gets a very nice takedown, using again his offensive wrestling very wisely and very smartly against Michael Chandler. Takes him down, takes control. Chandler has the moments, obviously, of him, just getting Oliveira on his back and just slamming him on his back twice. Very funny, very cool, very entertaining and energetic. And good, good on Chandler in that fifth round, making very entertaining. He's a very entertaining fighter. A lot of people want to see his fights. He shows up and he shows out and has a great performance most of the time. But the back of the fucking headshots, what are we doing, referee? What are we doing, Michael Chandler? Very dirty. Also had a lot of cage grabs. Dirty fucking fighter. But if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying to win. You know what I mean? But great performance. I love the improvements. I love this type of patient and also really meticulous Charles Oliveira. I can't wait to see him be able to fight again for the championship belt, whether it be against Arman or Islam. Now, moving on to the main event, we had obviously the headliner, Jon Bones Jones versus Stipe Miocic. And I called for a stink fest, and it kind of was it. Really was. I mean, Jon Jones did look good. Honestly, I think his striking was kind of improved, especially his boxing. His jab, his power shots were landing very well, whether him being an orthodox or in southpaw. His inside low kicks were definitely money against Stipe Miocic. But really, just the body of work that Jon Jones was doing was the body kicks, the front kick stabs right to the abdomen of Stipe Miocic. You also had the spinning back kicks that led to the TKO victory that were there. You know, Jon Jones was up and down, just really systematically breaking down Stipe Miocic. And Stipe Miocic has been out of the octagon for about 4 years, is 42 years old, and he looked every bit of it. Was very slow, reactionary, flat-footed, not really doing much. Honestly, was very tentative. Didn't really know what to do and what to expect coming from Jon Jones. He did land a few nice right hands here and there. He had his moments. He had some success, but really the success was a little success, honestly, especially in that first round. That first round, Jon Jones, it stays on the feet. It's a little bit competitive, but honestly, Jon Jones is really taking it to Stipe Miocic. He gets the nice sweep and takedown over Stipe and just continues to pound Stipe in the face with this nasty ground and pound. Just raining elbows on his face. And while he does it, the rounds ends. Then 2 and 3, where honestly he gets the victory and he gets the TKO. It just stays on the feet. There's not really much takedowns or wrestling or much to be able to say in terms of grappling. It just stays on the feet, and just Jones just beat him to the punch. Was a lot faster and was a lot lighter. Looked a lot better, and was just overall a problem Stipe couldn't be able to handle. Even he's a 42-year-old man coming a 4-year layoff, and he called it quits. He retired. Shout out to Stipe, one of the best heavyweight champions, and obviously the heavyweight GOAT, having the accolades that he has in the heavyweight division. And Jon Jones, man, just continues to win, but he's very Jake Paul-esque, as if we were talking to you guys Friday night, Saturday morning. Picks and chooses his fight very to the liking of him being very victorious. Jon Jones doesn't get the call out for Tom Aspinall, so they're still ducking him. Clearly doesn't want to fight him. I mean, he has a great performance, but I mean, against Stipe Miocic, 42 years old, Cyril Gahn, now known as a grappler, has tremendous grappling and wrestling, known just for being a stand-up kickboxer that's good for tit for tats. But Jon Jones, man, great performance from him. He did his thing. He did what he needed to be able to do to get the victory. But this was what everybody was expecting him to do, to just break Stipe down. I called a snoo fest. I thought he was going to win regardless. But, it is what it is. Jon Jones wins. We want to see him fight Tom Aspinall. That's the only fight I want to see him have. I don't want to see him fight Pereira. It will literally be a repeat of what it was against Cyril Gahn, except for the power threat of Alex Pereira is a lot bigger than what it is with Cyril Gahn. But besides that, yeah, man, I mean, this card was pretty all right. It had a few bangers. It had its usual stinkers, per usual for most cards of what it has. But that's my recap and reaction of UFC 309. Obviously, you like this video. If you like this video, comment your opinions. And who do you want to see these fighters fight next in their next fight, whether they won or lost on this card. And subscribe, man. Subscribe if you want to be able to continue to see this consistency of a content that you cannot get your eyeballs and ears out of. This is what I'm giving to you guys. You guys need it, and I'll give it to you. Again, thank you guys again for watching, and peace.